Welcome back to the Bible Stories. As you watch today, you will notice there are no ads playing on this video. That is because YouTube has completely demonetized our channel. We now depend on support from viewers like you to keep making these videos. If the videos on our channel have blessed your life, please consider supporting us by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description. It was cold in Jerusalem that night, the kind of cold that drives you to find a fire and stand close. In the courtyard of the high priest, a small group gathered around the flames. One of the men at that fire was a fisherman from Galilee. His name was Peter. Only a few hours earlier, he had promised out loud and in front of everyone that he would die before he ever turned his back on Jesus. He had meant it. There was no lie in his heart when he said it. He loved Jesus. He had left his nets, his boat, and his old life to follow him. He had walked on water toward him. He had been the first to say it plainly, that this man was the Son of the living God. And now, standing by a stranger's fire, warming his cold hands, he was about to swear 3 times over that he had never known the man. It is one of the saddest moments in the Gospels, and strangely, it became the doorway to the most important work of his life. Peter failed in the worst way a friend can fail. He denied the very person he loved most, at the very moment that person needed a friend. And yet, Jesus did not throw him away. He kept him close and gave him work to do that would shape the rest of history. So why did Jesus still choose him? And if you have ever failed someone you love, or failed God, or failed yourself, then this is not only Peter's question, it is yours too. To answer it, we will walk through the night. Peter fell the morning he was restored, and a part of this story that almost no one talks about. The long, silent middle after the failure and before the healing, where so many of us are living right now. To understand what happened in that courtyard, we have to go back a few hours to a quiet room where Jesus shared a last meal with his friends. The mood in that room was tense. Jesus knew he was about to be arrested. He knew the men around the table were about to scatter like sheep. And he turned to Peter, the loudest and boldest of them all, and said something that Peter did not fully understand at the time. Jesus told him that the enemy wanted to shake him hard, to sift him like wheat. And then he said these words, "But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." Jesus did not say, "if you turn back." He said, "when you have turned back." Before Peter had failed even once, Jesus was already speaking about the day Peter would return. He was not surprised by the fall that was coming. He was already on the other side of it, waiting for Peter, planning to use him again. And notice the first thing Jesus says, "I have prayed for you." Before Peter sinned, Jesus was praying for him. Not after, when the damage was done. Before. While Peter still felt strong and sure of himself, Jesus was already holding him up in prayer for a weakness Peter could not yet see. This is the kind of love most of us have never let ourselves believe in. We imagine that God is watching, waiting for us to slip, ready to be disappointed. But here we see Jesus, fully aware of the failure ahead. And instead of pulling away from Peter, he prays for him and promises him a future. The care of Jesus for Peter did not begin after Peter proved himself. It was already at work while Peter was still weak. Peter, of course, did not hear it that way. He was offended that Jesus would even suggest he might fall. He insisted he was ready to go to prison and to death. He was sincere. He was also about to learn something about himself that he did not want to know. There is a quiet warning in this for all of us. The place where we feel strongest is often the place where we are most likely to fall, because that is the place we stop watching. Peter was sure of his courage. He never thought to guard it. And the very thing he was proudest of, his loyalty, was the thing that gave way first. When the soldiers came into the garden and arrested Jesus and began to lead him to the house of Caiaphas the high priest, the disciples ran. Peter ran too. But then he did something the others mostly did not do. He came back. He followed the crowd that was dragging Jesus away, and the Bible gives us a small detail that tells us so much about the human heart. It says, Peter followed at a distance, close enough to see, but too far away to be counted as one of them. That phrase describes a lot of us. We do not walk away from God completely. We just follow at a distance, close enough to still call ourselves believers, far enough that no one will make us pay a price for it. Peter was caught between two things. He loved Jesus and could not abandon him entirely, and he was afraid and could not stand beside him openly. So he hovered in the middle, in the courtyard, by the fire, hoping no one would look at him too closely. But someone did. It did not take a soldier or a judge to make Peter fall. It took a servant girl. She looked at him in the firelight and said he had been with Jesus. A simple comment, no threat behind it. And Peter, the man who had sworn he would die for his Lord, said he did not know what she was talking about. The first denial. A little while later, another person said the same thing. You are one of them. And again, Peter said no. The second denial. Then a third time, the people standing near him became sure of it. Your accent gives you away, they said. You are from Galilee, like him. And here, Peter did the most painful thing of all. The Bible tells us, then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I do not know the man. He did not even say his name. He reduced Jesus, his teacher, his friend, the one he had confessed as the Son of God, to the man, a stranger, someone he had never met. He used cursing to make it sound true. He wanted these people to believe, beyond any doubt, that he had nothing to do with Jesus. And the moment those words left his mouth, a rooster crowed. It is worth noticing how small the pressure was. No one held a sword to Peter's throat. No soldier dragged him before a judge. A servant girl and a few people by a fire were enough. That is how failure often comes. Not in some grand test we could brace ourselves for, but in an ordinary moment, a passing question, a small chance to stay safe by pretending we are not who we are. Peter did not plan to deny Jesus. He simply answered and answered again, and by the third time, the lie had taken him further than he ever meant to go. What happens next is one of the quietest and most powerful moments in all of Scripture. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Before we continue with the current video, I want to show you a quick trailer for our Bible quiz app. Let's take a look. Think you know the Bible? Let's put your faith to the test. Play every day to grow your wisdom and build a strong habit that stays with you. Enjoy fun, quick quizzes that help you learn and remember the Bible better than ever. Earn faith points, level up, and climb the global leaderboard. Unlock the stories of the Bible today. Download now. Somehow, across that courtyard, in the middle of his own suffering, while he was bound and accused and on his way to die, Jesus turned his head and looked at Peter. We are not told exactly what was in that look. The Bible does not describe Jesus' face, but we know what it did to Peter. The text says he remembered the words Jesus had spoken, that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. And then we read this, and he went outside and wept bitterly. He could not stay by the fire anymore. He stumbled out into the dark and broke down and cried in a way that grown men rarely cry, the kind of weeping that comes from a place too deep for words. That look did not destroy Peter. It did not finish him off. If Jesus had looked at Peter with disgust, Peter might have done what another man did that same week. Judas also failed Jesus, and Judas also felt the weight of it. But Judas ran toward despair and could not find his way back. Peter wept, but his weeping was not the end of him. It was the beginning of his turning back. The difference between these two men was not the size of their sin. Both betrayed Jesus in their own way on the same terrible night. The difference was where they ran afterward. One ran away from grace and could not believe there was any road home. The other wept and carried his broken heart and waited without knowing yet that Jesus had already prayed for this very moment and had already spoken of the day he would come back. If you have ever cried like Peter cried, you need to hear this. That kind of weeping is not the sound of God leaving you. Sometimes it is the sound of your heart turning back toward Him. This is where the story becomes your story. Most of us know what it is to fail in a way that we cannot take back. Words we said that we wish we could pull out of the air. A moment where we should have stood up and stayed silent instead. A promise we broke. A person we let down. A time we knew the right thing and did the easy thing. We carry these moments like stones in our pockets, and we take them out at night and turn them over and feel the weight of them all over again. And the hardest part is often not what others think of us. The hardest part is what we think of ourselves. We become our own accusers. We decide that we are disqualified, that whatever good we hope to do is now off the table, that God surely cannot use someone who has fallen this far. Peter could have spent the rest of his life that way. He could have decided that the courtyard was the truest thing about him, that the curses were his real self, finally showing that a man who denies his Lord 3 times has no right to lead, to teach, or to be trusted with anything holy ever again. But that is not how this story ends. And the reason it does not end there is not because Peter found the strength to forgive himself. It is because Jesus came looking for him. That is the part we have to understand. Peter did not climb his way back into Jesus' favor. He did not earn his place again with a long apology or a list of good deeds to make up for the bad. Jesus took the first step. Jesus, after rising from the dead, went and found the man who had denied him and gave him back everything he thought he had lost. But the finding did not happen the next morning. We tend to rush from the courtyard straight to the beach because we know the happy ending. Peter did not. Between the night he wept and the morning Jesus called to him from the shore, there were days. Days of not knowing. Days when Jesus was in the tomb and the world had gone dark, and Peter had to live with the sound of his own voice, saying, "I do not know the man." We do not often talk about those days, but they may be the part of the story that touches us most, because that silence is where a lot of us live. When you have failed, the hardest stretch is rarely the moment itself. It is the long, quiet middle after the damage is done and before any healing has come. It is the waiting. You have prayed, and heaven seems silent. You have said you are sorry, and nothing feels different yet. You lie awake and replay it, and there is only the wait and the wondering whether anything can ever be put back together. Peter had to walk through that. He had to sit in a room with the other disciples, all of them grieving, and carry his own particular shame on top of the shared sorrow. He did not yet know that Jesus had already prayed for him. He did not yet know there was a plan that reached past his failure. He only knew that he had fallen and that the one who could forgive him was, as far as he could see, gone. If you are in that silence right now, hold on to this. The quiet was not the end of Peter's story. It only felt like the end. While Peter waited in the dark, the resurrection was already coming. The grace that would meet him on the beach was already on its way. The silence was not God's absence. It was the space before the morning. Sometimes the most faithful thing a failing person can do is simply to stay, to not run all the way off the way Judas did, to wait in the room with the others, broken but present, until the voice finally calls from the shore. Peter stayed. And because he stayed, he was there when grace came looking. After the resurrection, the disciples went back to something familiar. They went fishing. Peter, the fisherman, returned to his boat and his nets on the Sea of Galilee, as if trying to find his footing in the only world he had known before Jesus called him. They fished all night and caught nothing. Then, as the morning light came, a figure called out to them from the shore and told them to throw their net on the other side. They did, and the net filled with fish, so many they could hardly pull it in. And one of the disciples realized who the stranger was. It was the Lord. Peter did not wait for the boat. He threw himself into the water and swam to shore. Whatever shame he carried, his love for Jesus was stronger than his fear of facing him. That tells us something true about Peter. The denial was real, but so was the love underneath it. When they reached the shore, they found that Jesus had already made a fire, a charcoal fire with fish on it and bread. He had prepared breakfast for the very men who had abandoned him, and here is a detail so quiet that many people read right past it. The night Peter denied Jesus, he had been standing by a charcoal fire in the courtyard. Now, on the beach, Jesus builds another charcoal fire and invites Peter to come and eat. The same kind of fire that had been the scene of Peter's worst failure now became the scene of his healing. Jesus did not avoid the place of the wound. He met Peter right there at a fire in the early morning and turned it into a table of grace. There is mercy in that choice. Jesus could have erased every reminder of the courtyard. Instead, he recreated the very setting and filled it with welcome. He showed Peter that the place of his shame could become the place of his restoration. The fire that had heard Peter's denial would now warm the meal where Jesus called him back. After they had eaten, Jesus turned to Peter, and what he did next was so gentle and so deliberate that it could only have come from a heart full of love. He asked Peter a question. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter said yes. "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Then Jesus asked again, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Again, Peter said, "Yes." And Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." Then, a third time, Jesus asked, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And here the Bible tells us Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. 3 questions. Peter felt the weight of it because 3 was the number of his denials. And he answered from somewhere deep and raw, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Look at what Jesus is doing. 3 times Peter had denied him by that other fire. Now, 3 times Jesus gives him the chance to say out loud what is truest about him. He does not make Peter grovel. He does not bring up the courtyard. He does not say, "How could you?" or "I expected better." He asks one thing, and he asks it 3 times, gently undoing each denial with a question of love. And notice what Jesus does not ask. He does not ask, "Peter, are you strong enough now?" He does not ask, "Peter, can you promise me you will never fail again?" Peter had already tried promising, His promises were not the foundation. Jesus asks only one thing: do you love me? Because love, not flawless performance, is what Jesus was building on all along. There is freedom in that for anyone who has failed. Jesus is not standing over you asking whether you are finally strong enough to be trusted. He is asking whether you still love him. And if your answer, even through tears, even from a heart that feels unworthy, is yes, then you are exactly the kind of person he restores. Here is what makes the restoration even more striking. Jesus did not simply forgive Peter and send him home with a clean record. He gave him a job. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. These were not small words. Jesus was handing Peter the care of his people. He was making the man who had denied him into a shepherd of the very flock Jesus was about to leave behind. This is not the action of someone who barely tolerates a person who let him down. This is someone who looks at a broken man and says, I still trust you with what matters most to me. Think about how strange this would seem by our usual way of measuring people. If a man failed at the most important moment of his life, we would say he had lost his right to lead. We would say, find someone more reliable. We would never put the failure in charge. But Jesus did, and he did it on purpose. Because the Peter who would go on to lead and teach and strengthen others was a Peter who finally understood grace from the inside. The old Peter trusted his own courage. He boasted that he would never fall. The new Peter knew exactly how weak he could be, and knew even better how deep the mercy of Jesus ran. A man like that does not look down on the people he leads. A man like that can be gentle with the failing because he remembers his own night by the fire. That is why Jesus had said, back in that upper room, when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Peter's failure, once it was healed, became the very thing that made him able to strengthen others. He could look a struggling believer in the eye and say, I know what it is to fall, and I know that Jesus came and found me anyway. So we come back to the question at the center of all of this. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Why did Jesus still choose him? The answer is woven through everything we have seen. Jesus chose Peter because the choosing never depended on Peter's strength in the first place. From the day Jesus called him from his nets, the relationship was built on grace, not on Peter being impressive. Peter brought no special qualifications. He was a fisherman with a quick temper and a habit of speaking before thinking. Jesus knew all of that and called him anyway. So when Peter failed, it did not break some agreement that said, I will keep you as long as you perform. There was never such an agreement. Jesus chose Peter because he knew the whole story before it happened. He was not fooled by Peter's confidence in the upper room, and he was not destroyed by Peter's denials in the courtyard. He had already prayed for Peter. He had already spoken of his return. The failure that felt like the end of everything to Peter was, to Jesus, a chapter he had already read. And on the other side of it, he was still holding out his hand. And Jesus chose Peter because love, real love that survives failure, was exactly what he was looking for. Not a man who had never stumbled, but a man who, when asked, could say through his tears, "You know that I love you." That love had been there all along, even in the courtyard, buried under fear. Jesus saw it. Jesus called it back to the surface. And Jesus built his church on people exactly like that. Peter was not chosen in spite of being human. He was chosen as a human, fully known, fully forgiven, and fully restored. That is the only kind of person Jesus has ever had to work with. There is a thread running through this whole story that we should not miss, because it is the heart of the good news. In every part of it, Jesus moves first. He prays for Peter before Peter falls. He looks at Peter in the moment of failure. After the resurrection, he goes to the shore and builds the fire and cooks the meal and starts the conversation. Peter never has to find his own way back into favor. Grace keeps coming toward him. This is the difference between the faith of Jesus and the tired religion of trying harder. So many people believe deep down that they must clean themselves up before God will want them. They think the order is, first, I fix myself, then God accepts me. But the whole story of Peter turns that around. God comes to the failing man first. The welcome comes first. The healing comes first. And out of that healing, the changed life follows. If you have been waiting until you are good enough to come back to God, you may be waiting forever, because that day never quite arrives for any of us. The good news is that you do not have to wait for it. The same Jesus who walked the shore looking for Peter is the one who comes looking for you, not to shame you, not to remind you of every mistake you have ever made, but to ask the same gentle question, do you love me? And to give you still something to do, a life that matters, a place among his people, a future you thought you had thrown away. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you have carried a particular failure for years, and you have quietly decided that it defines you. You have read stories like Peter's and thought they were about other people, special people, people God could use, and not about someone like you. Maybe you are getting older, and you look back over your life and see more times you stayed silent when you should have spoken, or spoke when you should have stayed silent. And a voice whispers that it is too late now, that your best chance to be useful to God is behind you. Maybe you feel alone in it. The people around you seem to have it together, and you carry your failures in private, and you wonder if anyone would still respect you if they knew. Hear this, as gently as it can be said. Peter wept bitterly in the dark, and he was sure in that moment that he had ruined everything. He did not know that Jesus had already prayed for him. He did not know that breakfast on the beach was coming. He did not know that the loudest failure of his life would become the doorway to the greatest work of his life. He could only feel the weight of what he had done. You may only be able to feel the weight of what you have done, but the rest of the story is just as true for you as it was for him. There is a Jesus who knows the whole story, who is not surprised by your fall, who has not written you off, and who is moving toward you right now, not away from you. We know how Peter's story continued because the Bible does not leave us guessing. Not long after that morning on the beach, the followers of Jesus gathered in Jerusalem, and the Spirit of God came upon them. And the man who stood up to preach in front of a crowd of thousands, the man whose voice carried the first great message of the early church, was Peter. The same Peter who had once cursed and sworn that he did not know Jesus now stood in public and proclaimed him to the whole city. Thousands believed that day. The man who denied Jesus by a fire became the man who could not stop speaking his name. The failure did not end his calling. It deepened it. He was not a weaker leader because he had fallen. In a strange and beautiful way, he was a stronger one because he led as a man who had been forgiven much and who knew it. That is the pattern of grace. It does not just patch us up and send us back to where we were. It takes the very place of our deepest wound and makes it the source of our truest strength. The shepherd who had once run away knew how to go after the lost. The man who had been forgiven everything knew how to forgive. The one who had stood by the wrong fire and denied his Lord became the one who would stand before crowds and rulers and never deny him again. Your failure does not have to be the period at the end of your usefulness. In the hands of Jesus, it can become the very thing that makes you gentle, humble, and able to reach people that the unbroken never could. The world is full of tired, struggling souls who do not need someone who has never fallen. They need someone who fell and was lifted and can show them the way back. After 3 denials, after the curses, after the rooster crowed and the tears fell in the dark, Jesus still chose him. Not for anything Peter managed to recover or prove, but simply because of who Jesus is. He is the one who prays for us before we fall, who looks at us with grace in the middle of our failure. He is the one who does not measure us by our worst night, but by the love he sees underneath it, and by what he has decided, in his mercy, to do with us still. Peter's story is in the Bible for a reason. It is there so that no one who has ever failed would believe the lie that failure is final. It is there so that the person sitting alone, turning over an old regret, would understand that the God of Peter is the God who comes looking every time. If you have been following at a distance, you can come close again. If you have been standing out in the cold, sure that you have no right to come back. The fire is already lit, and the meal is already made, and the question is already waiting, asked not with anger, but with love. Do you love me? You do not have to be strong enough. You do not have to have it all together. You only have to answer, even with a trembling voice, even through tears, the way Peter did. Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And the same voice that called a broken fisherman to feed his sheep is still saying to you the words he said to Peter when it was all over and all made new. Follow me. If this video helped you grow deeper in God's Word, I want to personally invite you to be part of what we are building here. Every video on this channel takes many hours of study and careful research to make sure we bring you content that is faithful to Scripture and worthy of your time. If you would like to support this mission and help us keep making these videos, you can find a link in the description below to give a one-time gift or become a monthly supporter. Every gift, no matter the size, goes directly toward creating more content like this. And if you are not in a position to give right now, that is completely fine. The best thing you can do is subscribe, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and keep studying God's Word with us. Thank you for being here, and may God bless you richly.